Hi, my name is Chris Sanders. I'm the Director of Customer Reliability Engineering at Replicated, and I'm here to help you understand, onboard, and get the most value out of our support offerings. With a quick agenda, I'm going to introduce the teams you'll be working with and the expertise they provide a process overview for requesting support and managing access to those support requests, and I'm going to have some advice on how to get the fastest response and do some training for your support teams to ensure that you get the best value. If you're watching this pre-recorded, there will be replicated individuals available for questions and answers. Start by talking about the teams you'll be interacting with. While it may not be initially obvious that you are engaging with different groups within Replicated, it can be helpful to understand the benefits these different groups provide. The customer engineering organization is specifically focused on helping you get started. This team will provide labs to teach tools, advice on your architecture, and assistance getting your specific use case configured and ready for your first deployments. You'll get to know your customer engineering team members, and they'll have context on your application as well to provide continuity over extended conversations. This team may engage engineers from our engineering team to help answer specific questions. Several of you may have spoken with me, for example, during your onboarding if you had questions or required some guidance on storage options, which I've done before. As you become more familiar with the available tools and gain experience with using them for your specific application, you'll naturally need less guidance and assistance. Questions typically become more specific and technical in nature and could involve helping diagnose a failure of your application in your customer's environment. This is when you begin engaging with engineering support. The engineering support team are engineers who work on the various products at Replicated. The name support team is a bit of a misnomer. All of our engineers provide support. We simply refer to everyone who's doing that as the engineering support team. This means their depth of knowledge in their product areas will be very good. We provide direct engineer to engineer conversations so you can get meaningful feedback quickly. This large pool of engineers, however, do not necessarily have a priori knowledge of your specific application or use case. I'll talk about the implications of that more later. For now, I really just wanted to establish the distinction between these groups that you'll be working with. And now that we've done that, let's talk about how you know who it is you're engaging with in the various ways you could be communicating. When you first interface with Replicated, you will generally interact via GitHub or via Slack. A solution architect or a customer success manager, for example, may create tasks directly in your GitHub Collab repository to help track and plan your onboarding process. These communication methods can be real time in the case of Slack and also asynchronous via GitHub issues. Interactions with this team can be very organic, carrying context between discussions. These organic conversations are enabled by both our team and yours having a typically smaller group of dedicated people involved. Vendor Portal is how you interact with the other teams. Vendor Portal has several ways to request support and has different audiences. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the first item in this list, open a support request. This is how you start a conversation with engineering support. The other options allow you to discuss features with our product team and engage with community of vendors and engineers in a less formal fashion. Using the vendor portal to open a support request is always interacting with engineering support. Although the conversation continues in your collab repository, the fact that the request originates from the vendor portal entry point is how you know you'll be speaking with engineering support. Additionally, vendor portal is what manages our on-call escalations. It is the only way to trigger an out-of-hours response from our engineering team. Your Slack channel will remain, even as you progress in maturity cycle with our products. It's important to recognize that it doesn't constitute a formal support request, though. This means your support SLA and escalations do not apply to Slack or even the community forums. One last comment: if you start a conversation about an issue outside of Vendor Portal and later decide you need formal support, you need to be sure to provide appropriate context when you open the formal support request. The engineer working support won't likely have that context from prior conversations or Slack. That brings us to our next topic, creating the actual support request. Issues created in Vendor Portal for both feature request and support request ultimately are tracked in your GitHub Collab repository. This is a private repository that our team and yours has access to. It's important to know that your team is provided admin access and should be managing who has access within your organization. As you add team members or offboard members, you can adjust who in your organization has access to view and engage on your support requests. Replicated uses groups to manage our teams. There are 3 groups and 1 bot user that we maintain. All other groups or users are managed by your team. If you're not familiar with GitHub, all the groups start with an @ symbol like you'll see in an email address. The customer success team is the customer engineering team we just spoke of. The engineering team is our engineering support team. And the sales team are replicated sales team members for your account who you're probably already familiar with. The 1 bot user is named Replicated Collab Bot. It's the bot user we use to create issues. This bot is always the initial author for a support request, and it provides labels to classify the issue for our teams based on the information you provided when you opened the request. If you don't know who manages your access, if that person is no longer employed with you, or you have any other questions, please let us know via your customer engineering team member or via a support request if you have access but just have questions about administering it. Any request to adjust access will go through an escalation process and require approval from a point of contact at your company. We do not assume that just because a requester has access to open a support request that they also should have authority to add or remove individuals from your repository. You should ensure you have access set up correctly and consider how you want to onboard or offboard team members as early as possible before you find yourself in need of opening a support request. With access set up, I'd like to briefly speak about how you decide if you're opening a support or feature request. The decision point, if you're looking for a support request or a feature request, is largely driven by the type of issue you're having. If you don't know how something is supposed to work, or you think it's working incorrectly, you probably have a support request. If you do know how something works, but have use cases you can't address or can't address as well as you'd like to, that's likely a feature request. It's not uncommon for a feature request to be uncovered or discovered during a support request. If this happens, you should open the feature request separate from the support request that discovered it. Support requests are intentionally short lived. We aim to solve your specific problem and close the case as an indication that the issue has been mitigated. We do not leave support requests open for possible future improvements. Each request represents a current actionable issue we're assisting you with. Feature requests are not time bound and can remain open. You can interact with product teams to discuss your goals and how those evolve over time. Because both types of issues ultimately end up in your collab repository, you can link between the issue types. If you open a feature request identified based on learnings in a support request, you can link to that original support request to provide additional context without losing the feature request amongst the focused discussion of recovering or fixing an issue. The separation of workflows helps ensure long-term discussions of features or enhancements are not lost in the sometimes stressful activity of solving a current active issue. Similarly, separating feature requests from support requests, you should create a new support request even for something that appears to be a reoccurrence of an issue you have seen before. As before, you can always link to a previous support request if you believe it carries context or relevant information. There are 2 primary benefits for this. First, it's very common for an issue to present with similar symptoms but have a very different root cause. Assuming the 2 issues are the same can actually delay appropriately identifying the issue. Secondly, maintaining one specific request per issue avoids the common mistake of addressing part of a support request and not all of it. For example, 2 similar issues combined in a single request may result in one environment being fixed and missing the fact that the second environment was still unhealthy. Next, I'm going to highlight some of the most important fields you'll find on the support request form. I won't be covering all fields. I just want to highlight the ones that are either frequently misunderstood or provide a strong signal to our team that are particularly useful to understand. First, the product area dropdown shown here. This field can vary depending on the products you use. You may not see the classic products, for example, if you're not using those. The intention of this field is to try and engage the appropriate engineers who are most likely to understand and address your issue quickly. While it's true that issues can present in one product and have a root cause in another, any guidance you can provide helps us engage the right team first the majority of the time. If you select the wrong product area, our engineers may still be able to assist you regardless, or they may just ask a colleague for assistance. So, some examples to help clarify this. If your user is struggling to generate a support bundle in the COTS admin console, but are successful and generate it from the troubleshoot command line, the best option to select in that case would be the app manager, because that's where you're experiencing the failure, even if it's possible the root cause is somehow in the troubleshoot project. If you're using a distributed storage provider and you find that the storage provider isn't working as expected, you would then select the curl Kubernetes installer because it's where you specified the storage provider in your application. While it's true that the app manager uses the storage to deploy your application, the curl team are best equipped to assist with failures in the components that you configure in that product. Again, this is a best effort judgment. We will work with you to engage the correct engineers, but it is in your best interest to consider which team might be the most appropriate to ensure quick resolutions. Next up, I'd like to talk about frequently misunderstood fields. The currently down question shown here is one that provides a strong signal to our team, but is sometimes misunderstood. If your support request is about a customer's installation and the application was previously running, but is either completely non-functional or severely degraded, you should answer yes to this question. A distinction I'm making here is that a failure to install would not typically be considered a currently down situation. Understandably, the application isn't running, but in this case, it's because it hasn't run before at all. Misunderstanding the question can greatly delay an engineer from understanding and properly identifying the issue. Let's again use an example to help clarify. A problem which presents the same but is diagnosed differently depending on the app that was previously running or not is a failure to pull images. A new install that is failing to pull images is very frequently due to network issues, a proxy in the environment, or maybe even a lack of or misconfigured credentials. These are common of first installs and would be likely where the engineer would first look. An existing install with the same issue is unlikely to have had a proxy added, or at least not without explicit mention in the initial support request, or credentials changed. So while not ruling out a networking issue, the first item we would typically investigate in this case might be the version of Echo and the age of the cluster due to possible certificate expirations, which can also cause image pull failures. Understanding if something was previously working directly impacts the first troubleshooting steps. I have one more commonly misunderstood issue to highlight. It's not uncommon that people read this particular statement up to the point of the word reproduced. Answer yes and move on. If you can reproduce an issue, please provide us the necessary spec, steps, licenses, or whatever else we need to be able to reproduce. Having a reproducer for an issue is the gold standard of troubleshooting. It's a high bar, but if you can reproduce an issue, it can be one of the fastest ways to resolve even tough problems. This question is not asking if the issue happens consistently. For example, if running a backup fails every time you run it, that indicates the issue is consistent, but not that it can be reproduced outside of this specific environment. If installing that same application and configuring it in a test environment does not fail, this question should be answered no to indicate that the site where it is failing is where we need to focus our investigation. If you've not attempted to reproduce, you should also answer no to this question. You should only be answering yes if you have a confirmed way to reproduce. An important piece of context that this question helps answer is if the failure is likely to be related to the environment itself. If you indicate that it can be reproduced, an engineer may deprioritize investigating the environment, returning to the hypothetical backup failure. If the error is caused by a storage provider in the environment, resolution could be delayed as the engineer investigates failures that aren't specific to the environment. That's all I have about the process of creating requests. I want to finish today with some advice on writing support requests themselves. Engineers like solving problems. I want to help you and your support team understand good practices that can get engineers engaged into the root cause of your issues. If you have new support teams or even junior members of your team, please consider including the following or similar guidance for them, even if they aren't here today, in training. Providing good context on a support request is paramount to a quick resolution. When you're opening a support request, you're explaining an issue you are encountering to an experienced engineer with no guaranteed prior context with your application or customer environment. Including a support bundle answers common questions and provides a point of reference for our team. Providing a support bundle gives a known common set of resources for us to orient around. A recent review of our support cases has found Severity 1 issues are closed 3 times faster when a support bundle was included in the initial request. Support bundles are also how our teams together can scale support. By iteratively improving support bundles for the issues you experience, we can reduce repeat questions and expedite resolutions. If a support bundle does not include the necessary information to identify and resolve an issue, our combined goal is to improve the bundle for next time. Continually improving the support bundle and tooling is a top priority for Replicated. If you're having issues engaging or using these tools, please open a feature request or support request as you would any other part of the Replicated ecosystem of tools. For example, the time investment to create a support bundle should be relatively small compared to the value it brings. If you or your users find it burdensome or difficult to collect, let us know and let's work together to fix that. I've intentionally listed this as the first item you can include about the issue you're experiencing. If you want to decrease time to resolution, reduce questions, and get to the root of issues faster, support bundles are the most important training you can provide both for your support team and your customers. All of the benefits Replicated receives from support bundles are available to your teams as well. Troubleshoot has broad applicability for everyone supporting applications on Kubernetes. I frequently find support teams have valuable input and contributions to operationally minded projects, and we welcome your participation, even if you aren't an experienced Go developer. Being precise in your request can actually be a bit more difficult than it initially sounds. If you aren't already explicitly training on this or a variation of it, you'd probably find it beneficial to look at your support requests for precision. The phrase carries a lot of implications, so let me unpack some of what I mean by precision. Precision means only describing what you know to be true and being clear if you don't know or are making assumptions about something. If you feel you have a good understanding of a problem, describe what information you used to come to that conclusion. If you aren't clear where you're making assumptions or how you're drawing conclusions, an engineer working with you may believe you have more rigorously tested assumptions than you actually have. Using generalized phrases like broken or not working carry very little diagnostic or descriptive value by themselves. Let me use an example to help demonstrate generalized phrases. If a new support request comes in and says, I can't access the application, you'll likely get clarifying questions before anyone can clearly understand the issue to help. Some of the questions I would expect to see are, how are you accessing it? From the command line or from a browser? From where are you trying to access it? Are you accessing from within the cluster or outside the cluster? And what do you actually mean by access? Are you receiving an RBAC error, an HTTP error code, or something else entirely? You've likely already done some initial investigation into failures when you open a support request. Describing what you have done and, just as critically, informing us if you continue to make changes is very important. An environment that has changed warrants a new support bundle most of the time, at the very least, a clear update about what you've changed. Another example, I was reviewing a case not long ago where an individual on my team was working to resolve some issues, and the individual they were working with continued to troubleshoot the environment. This was, however, not clearly identified. This caused significant confusion as the engineer was working on the case, couldn't get an understanding of the environment, and was presented with seemingly impossible set of conflicting information. In an effort to move quickly, the end result was actually a slow resolution. But taking the time to ensure the engineer you're working with is both informed and understands changes will help ensure they can continue to actively assess. I don't think the final bullet up here needs an explicit example, but it is worth saying providing more information is not necessarily being precise. Please ensure your team's aware that when we're talking about precision, it's these things above. It's not specifically talking about volume of communication. Finally, these are all things you should be asking of your customers as well. If you don't understand what issue your customer is facing, it's unlikely we will either. The last point I want to cover for writing good support requests is to be mindful of formatting. While the team won't be picky about formatting, some formatting changes make a pretty big difference to the ability to follow the conversation. Screenshots, for example, are a very poor way to convey textual information, like log files. Large blocks of text from log files can also cause problems if pasted directly into a comment. It causes people to miss comments either before or after the big block of text. If you need to include log files, your best option would be to attach a supplemental file as an attachment. At the very least, if you do need to paste it in for some reason, use Markdown formatting to hide this large continuous block of text to ensure readability. Finally, if you have several questions, it's best to organize those together, preferably at the end of a comment. Asking questions throughout a comment, in particular throughout the center of a paragraph in a comment, often causes the reader to only see one of the questions and forget that the others are even there. So, by spending just a few minutes on each post to reread and review your formatting, you can significantly increase the readability and understanding for your reader. Thanks for your time today. And if you're watching this pre recorded, replicated representatives should be around for additional questions.